Welcome everyone to the AI Research and Network series. I'm Sagun Giri, one of the coordinators of the program. Unfortunately, Mustafa has a conference presentation today, so he could not be here, so he sends his apologies. So the goal of the program basically for AI Research and Network series is to highlight the amazing research work that has been going on at Elon in different departments, and to bring those researchers, AI enthusiasts, as well as AI staff who are interested in AI together to share those ideas, as well as foster some discussions around multidisciplinary AI research, as well as promote some collaboration across different fields, across different departments. In addition to that, we are also looking to, the long-term goal is to apply for funding, AI funding and grants, and Mustafa likes to point out that there are universities within North Carolina who have gotten those funding from NSF, and the long-term goal of the Office of AI Integration, as well as for Elon, is to apply for those funding and to work collaboratively across departments to apply for, small grants, $1 million, or even larger grants. And so one of the, if you can see, and Mustafa likes to highlight this one as well, is one of the universities that have gotten a 15 million grant is NC State. So if they can do it, why not us? So yeah. So in terms of today, we have, we're joined by Qian Xu, Dr. Qian Xu, Professor of Strategic Communications at Elon University, who is a dedicated mentor to undergraduate researchers. Her work focuses on how people interact with emerging technologies, especially AI in everyday communication. Today, Dr. Xu will share insights from a recent study exploring how people engage with AI depending on its conversational style and its role and the role it's expected to play. The study reveals some interesting patterns in how users respond and even adapt their own language based on how the AI presents itself. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Qian Xu.
Fantastic collaborator, and she brought in a lot of great ideas in terms of the design of the study and also the feasibility of the data collection for this one. So Sagun actually introduced, do I need to, okay. So, cool. Sagun actually did a fantastic description of my project, and I'm going to actually, and also on the flyer you see a more attractive title, but here I'm going to present a more boring title, really just highlighting the different things that have been studied in this study. So this study actually looks at the discourse, in other words, the interaction between human and AI, and also it looks at people's perception of the AI outputs, while looking at how two factors. One is the conversation style offered by AI as interface features, and the other is users' anticipated role of AI, how they together and interactively influence the discourse and the perception. So given that we don't have as many people, so if you have any question while I'm actually helping you understanding the study, sharing the findings, just please raise your hand, and we can have a more engaged conversation. So, okay. Who I am, just a little bit. Thank you for introducing who I am. And I think what I wanted to explain a little bit more is primarily my research area and the primary methodology that I take, especially given this is a series of, I would say, sessions that especially encouraging people to develop a collaborative relationship and finding probably some collaborations in terms of research opportunities across campus. So specifically, I mainly study the social and the psychological effects of communication technologies, especially in terms of information perception, information seeking, and also cognitive processing in the broader context of computer-mediated communication, CMC, human-computer interaction, HCI, and now HAI, human-AI interaction. And I'm a quantitative researcher, meaning that I deal with data, especially numerical data. And the primary data collection methodologies I feel comfortable with: experiment, survey, content analysis, and also I do big data analysis in terms of social media data, social media texts, such as tweets, such as posts. So before I'm going to introduce the research questions associated with the study, I would like us to actually think about some of the affordances provided by the generative AI platforms. So this is the one that we are probably very familiar with from the ChatGPT. And the affordance of the promptability that I'm referring to are those little clickable areas at the bottom. So that help you refine what specific task you wanted to actually pursue or actually complete by using this platform. And for those who are actually doing anything or teaching anything communication, visual communication, design related, you may be familiar with this one. It's the Stable Diffusion Online, and it actually provides the affordance for you to actually select a specific style by selecting some of the sample images to determine what kind of images will be generated based on the text input. So those features are considered as the so-called affordance of promptability. And I think Dr. Chen actually in one of her papers actually introduced and explained what promptability is. It essentially addresses the possibilities of actions. Users can do something to have an influence on the output of the generative AI. And given that is the situation, I wanted to actually provide a little bit context to define what we have been studying about. So we know that text-based inputs and prompts have actually been serving as the primary functions for users to interact with generative AI platforms. However, prompting or prompt engineering usually requires some of the skills and some of the knowledge actually for the users to master, to be comfortable with. So given that is the situation, generative AI interfaces started to integrate some of the affordance of promptability as interface features, as the interface choices or options, just like the two examples that we are showing here. So the conversation style that we'll be examining in this study is considered as a type of affordance of promptability that users does not need to actually text, but they can actually select or make choices to actually have an impact on the output. So given that text prompting serves as the primary means for users to actually interact with the AI. So there have been research brought up the question, so how would AI and also the regular users talk to each other? And this way of how they communicate with each other have something to do with a concept that is conversation style. Some of the early research in communications, especially interpersonal communications, have already shown that conversation style is really a result of the repeated use of linguistic devices like the words, syntax, lexicon, and also some other practical matters. And usually the choice of the styles are actually driven or motivated by the specific strategies the interactant of a conversation would like to actually adopt or would like to actually achieve. So given that is the situation, there have already been studies, some of the early studies, trying to explore if generative AI platforms can actually differentiate and also can offer different kinds of conversation styles when interacting with human beings. On the slide, I have listed some of the existing findings showing that, yes, AI can afford the differences between those pairs of conversation styles, such as being warm or emphasize more about the competence, Or they wanted to actually integrate more anthropomorphic cues to actually act more like a human being or more like a machine. So in other words, the tool-oriented conversation style. And also, depending on the tasks that you will actually adopt to actually interact with the AI to actually solve. So the problem nature, whether it should focus on the social aspect or the task aspect, has also been found as successfully being manipulated by AI conversational agents or AI chatbots. And also more recently, we have been seeing a lot of studies focusing on comparing the formal versus casual style by AI chatbots, and especially how that actually influences the way people understand and process the AI outputs. And towards the end of the presentation, I probably will also say something related to formal versus conversation style as a project that I have been working on, collaborating with some people in Hong Kong. So this study actually used the existing AI platform of Copilot, also partially because Elon has actually integrated Microsoft Copilot and made it available to this campus a while ago. So Chris and I actually initially found this different 3 conversation styles offered by Copilot starting from March 2023 was very interesting because this is something that hasn't actually been picked up by other, I would say, generative AI platforms around that time. So, however, I do have to actually make a disclaimer that this specific interface feature has already been taken down by Copilot around the end of the June 2024. And now, if you go to Copilot, what you will see is here, it still offers the different conversation styles, but now it's more text prompting based, rather than using the interface features as an affordance for promptability. However, initially when it was introduced and when we collected the data for this study, I would say in the spring of 2024, we were really curious because we read a lot of articles and noticing that people have been questioning whether those different conversation styles would lead to different outputs. So we thought, okay, one thing what we can do is we would actually do an experiment collecting the information from the users, how they interact with one of those styles, and see if the interaction discourse generated by AI or collaboratively generated by AI and regular users would be different. So specifically, we looked at how AI conversational style would influence 2 things. One is the readability, to what extent it's easy for people to understand, and also some of the linguistic characteristics of the AI outputs. And here, whenever I say AI, it's really just a Copilot. And also, there have been a lot of the assumptions surrounding to what extent AI platforms could encourage or discourage the real accommodation or adjustment of the way how human beings would actually talk about things during the interaction of AI. However, there is inconclusive, I would say, findings saying that, do people accommodate? Do people really adjust? And what kind of things motivate them to adjust or accommodate or actually avoid doing so? There is one classic theory that is called communication accommodation theory, especially in the context of interpersonal communication that was developed a while ago, especially in the context of talking about intergenerational, cross-generational communication, and also intercultural, cross-cultural communication. This particular theory argues that individuals may adjust their communication style and or process to align better with those who they are interacting with. And under this theory, it proposes actually 2 styles. One is the so-called convergent style. When we talk about convergence, we are not only referring to the verbal convergence, such as using some of the similar words my partner is talking about, or actually using the similar sentence structure when actually refer to each other during the interaction. But we also refer to or actually include things like gestures, facial expressions, some of the nonverbal cues. So here is an example. Like my son was born here in the United States, whereas I was originally from China. So when I brought my son back to China last year, what I noticed is there is some convergent communication style happened between my son and my parents. My son, English as a first language, and my parents, Chinese as a first language. And also, they have actually 65 years apart. So we do see a commendation in terms of the age and a commendation in terms of the use of the language and words happening at the same time. So like my son may actually try to speak a little bit slower when talking to my parents, but also at the same time, my parents have actually been over-explaining some of the things, even like the everyday items in Chinese while talking to my son, because they were thinking this will help him understand what they were referring to. That's what we refer to as the convergence in communication, as an adaptation strategy. But also, on the other hand, people may not always accommodate, may not always adjust. So they would just stick to whatever their style is. And some of you may say, how can we tell when a person would actually converge or actually diverge? Usually, this is motivated by the so-called social distance management. If I wanted to actually minimize the social distance while I'm interacting with another person, I may try to actually adopt the convergent style more. However, if I wanted to actually maintain the same social distance without any change, I may just do whatever I have already been doing, keeping up with the divergent style. However, it's important to note that this kind of accommodation is always mutual. It's not just a one-sided thing. So that's why a lot of the research, the scholars in interpersonal communication would say, whenever we study the interaction between people, we wanted to make sure we studied at the dyadic level rather than at the individual level. That's also why Chris and I, later on I'm going to introduce, decided to actually study the so-called style matching between the AI-generated output and also the input created by the users. So is CAT, communication accommodation theory, even applicable in human-AI interaction? There have already been some of the studies, early studies, especially comparing and also understanding the influence of AI conversational agents or AI chatbots, and also how they interact with a human being. They did actually find that users actually adjusted their communication style while they were interacting with the chatbots, and also ensure the way they talk about the things, they ask questions, would actually match of the ways how AI chatbots have been actually discussing things. Things like turn-taking and also using longer or shorter sentences have actually already been discovered as the evidence to support that CAT is still relevant. However, what we were talking about earlier is actually about the availability of conversation style as a choice, as an interface feature, as the so-called affordance of the promptability, rather than just actually going back and forth conversation based on text, based on prompting. So would that still actually lead to any kind of accommodation or adjustment? There could be two things that we need to actually take into consideration that may go against the hypothesis or assumptions of the communication accommodation theory. The first one is the fact that those different conversational styles are shown and being available as the interface features would give users some sense of freedom of choice. And this freedom of choice potentially could actually significantly boost the sense of agency. And given that is the situation, users may feel that I really have the control. I can control the things. And if that is the situation, if they feel they are in control, they may actually tend to accommodate less. And also, on the other hand, because those interface features are really simple, requiring almost the minimum effort from users, just click it, And then they would assume that whatever would actually come out of the chatbot will be automatic. So this perception of automation potentially would put the users in the mode of the mental underload, thinking that I don't have to do much because the automation will actually take care of the things. And if that is the situation, accommodation, adjustment will be less likely to happen. In order to understand really if the accommodation, adjustment, style matching actually would happen, we actually proposed the two questions. First, just compared to what we actually proposed earlier, we do want to see whether the availability of different conversational styles would actually lead to differences in terms of the readability and also linguistic characteristics in users' input prompts. But also more importantly, we really wanted to see if there is some convergence in terms of the AI outputs and the user inputs. In addition to that, we talked about the discourse occurred as part of the interaction. There would be the outcome. What might be the outcome? It's the user's evaluation of the information provided by AI platform, and also their perception of the overall, I would say, process. So specifically, Chris and I decided to actually check 4 aspects of the user's perceptions of the AI-generated outputs. The first aspect addresses the so-called accuracy and reliability, the level of those things that actually would allow us to actually check how users assess and perceive the so-called credibility of the outputs. The second aspects have something to do with users' perceptions of the degree to which that the AI-provided outputs actually align with the goals and the requirements that have actually been included as part of the user's input prompts, which addresses the relevance aspect of the perception. And the third aspect have something to do with users' perception to what extent that AI allowed them to actually complete their task requirements. So that have something to do with or associated with the quality of the perception. And the last aspect have something to do with whether users perceive the AI outputs as really comprehensive enough, sufficient, and also adequate for them to actually get the information, complete the task that they intended to complete. And that have something to do with the completeness perception of the AI outputs. So those are the, I would say, 4 things related to user perceptions that we have actually studied in this research project. In addition to conversational style, we are also interested in, we all make assumptions about what AI can do and also how AI will do things while we were using the AI platforms. And one thing that actually potentially could make a difference is the so-called what do we expect AI role will be or roles will be. Chris and I, we share the same academic advisor at Penn State while we were pursuing the PhD there. And Dr. Shyam Sundar and his, I would say, students and collaborators in the lab, they introduced some, actually a model of 4 primary roles of AI technologies across the context, across the applications. So those are co-author, creator, curator, and converser. So when AI is considered or anticipated or expected to be the co-author, then you would assume that they will be able to contribute and also gain the credit, just like the human users. So they are the collaborators. They are the one who deserve to be acknowledged, receive the credit of the outcome they generate, just like you. Whereas if AI is considered as creator, you would assume more autonomy on the AI's side because they will be able to generate things, serve as the communicators by themselves with less or almost non-human intervention. And then when AI is considered as a curator, it emphasizes more on the tool and also the machine aspect of it, in which AI serves the primary functions of collecting, organizing the data that would actually facilitate the task completion or actually allowing you to achieve some of the specific practical goals. Finally, AI as a converser. This is the one that people expect to see more social aspect of the AI to actually happen during your interaction, especially if you are engaging in some, I would say, extended interaction with the AI. You would expect AI to be able to carry a lot of the social cues and following what a human-to-human communication would be like. Some of you may say, okay, now I understand there are actually 4 possible AI roles. How would they actually interact with the conversation style that we just talked about? Matching is the key. So if users actually notice a matching between the anticipation and what they may intend to adopt as the communication strategy or interaction strategy with the AI system, then they are more likely to actually adopt the so-called tailored input prompts to facilitate the interaction to achieve the desired outcomes. So we would propose that the anticipated AI roles would moderate the influence of conversational style to actually influence what users would actually enter as the input, what kind of text they enter, as well as their perceptions. So given this moderating role of the anticipated AI roles, we propose 2 more questions. One addresses how AI roles interact with conversation style to input users' prompts, and the other actually addresses to what extent this kind of interaction effect may actually have an impact on users' perception of AI outputs. Any questions so far? It's more about the theory, how we actually apply some of the traditional communication theory to a new context of human-AI interaction. So overall, just a quick summary of the model that actually we tried to pursue. The primary independent variable in this study is actually about AI conversation style. We look at how it actually may have an impact on AI outputs, user inputs in terms of the discourse. And also, we try to see from a discourse perspective if there's anything like a style matching happens, and also to what extent style matching actually occurs, and then user perception. And we also look at the interaction between anticipated AI roles with the style, especially focusing on the outcomes of user inputs and user perceptions. So in other words, the user aspects. So that's the overall research model. So if everybody's okay, no questions so far, I will move on to talk about the specific experiment we did. Okay, cool. So what we did a 3x4 between subjects field experiment. We actually provided the instruction to the participants we recruited, and then allowing them to complete the task at their own convenience in terms of the place and also the time. It's important for me to explain that the variable of conversational style is a manipulated variable. We assign participants the specific role that they are going to interact with, whereas the anticipated AI role is actually a measured variable. So after they are actually given the task instruction, we ask them the question, which of the 4 roles listed here that you would expect or anticipate AI to actually accomplish or to actually carry during your interaction with it. And for the specific task, we ask participants to identify a major public health issue in the county where they reside, and also develop a strategic plan to address the issue. We intentionally keep the task as broad and also probably flexible, allowing room for the users and participants to actually really engage in some in-depth conversation with a co-pilot. But also at the same time, we required them to complete at least the 3 rounds of interaction with the co-pilot so that we will be able to have enough information to study the outputs and inputs, in other words, a complete discourse. But also we told them to limit their interaction with co-pilot to actually no more than 30 prompts. This is really just the limit of co-pilots in terms of its free version. And other than measuring their anticipated roles, we measured things like readability, and also linguistic characteristics. And I wanted to explain a little bit more about the linguistic characteristics that we have used. So in order to analyze how they have been using words in particular, we use the linguistic inquiry and word count. It's called, also abbreviated. You may have heard people referring it as the LOOK. It has application that you can download to your computer, and also it has a cloud version. So in this study, we focused on the 4 primary summative metrics: analytical thinking, cloud, authenticity, and emotional tone. And I'm going to start with explaining what the emotional tone here. Emotional tone addresses the positive, negative emotion words that have actually been used in a collection of text. So the higher score indicates the more positive emotion has actually, or positive emotion related words have actually been used compared to negative emotion related words. Whereas authenticity actually traces back to really the traditional definition of this concept. It actually emphasizes some of the things related to self-monitoring rather than actually being fake, being, I would say, deceptive. So given that is the situation, it actually emphasizes a lot about the use of the personal pronouns with the first person and the current tense and also singular forms. So those are the things that may actually contribute to the authenticity score by using Look. And then for the cloud, it has something to do with the confidence, certainty, and also leadership roles. So the lower the cloud score would actually indicate more uncertainty and more tentative tone as part of the language. Yes?
So did you do anything to control for whether or not Copilot had already, were they logging in with their own accounts? Did they log into a computer that you had? Or did it, I know they all collect information.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
That's a great question. So I'm going to mention this in a second. We didn't actually do this at Elon University simply just because we feel like we probably have a higher number of students or percentage of the students who have already had some experience with it. So we did it actually collaborating with a faculty member in UNC Charlotte, where Copilot was not introduced at all. So we did ask a question whether the students have used the Copilot before or not. But I think for this one, we asked all of the participants who signed up to actually do it, to actually create a new account. And for many of them, this is the first time that they have ever had a Copilot account. And we do ask them to actually keep the questionnaire open while doing that, to actually address the second part of your question. If you are asking how we collected their interaction with Copilot, we asked them to actually export and save their entire conversation with the Copilot and actually submit it to, I would say, the questionnaire, the online survey that we provided. So does that answer your question? Yeah, okay, great. And for analytical thinking, they have something to do with the reasoning, the structure, and also the logic included as part of the entire dialogue between users and also the AI. I have already mentioned the user perceptions that we measure, so I'm not going to repeat them. In addition to those dependent variables, we did actually collect information about some of the variables we wanted to control to ensure that they are not going to actually mess up with our findings. The first one is their perceived knowledge of the topic itself. And given that it's really just a broad task, users may actually identify any issue. So this will actually give us some information or some ideas about to what extent their existing knowledge may have an impact on their assessment of the AI outputs. In addition to that, we did actually ask them the questions how frequently they have been using generative AI in the past months. And also we asked them about their prior experience with Copilot. The majority of them actually never used a Copilot before during the time when we collected the data. So we actually was able to get the responses from over, I think, 160 people who completed this experiment. However, you will see here on the slides, only 137 outputs and also the perceptions of the AI outputs data were actually included in the analysis. Partially is just because we excluded any of the interactions that didn't actually meet the minimum requirement of 3 rounds of interaction, because we would assume that's too, I would say, not enough information from the user side. And we excluded some of the data where users didn't actually upload the entire conversation. Maybe during the time of exporting, copy pasting, some random error occurred. So that's how we actually ended up with 137 participants and actually focused on their data. So there were more females than males. And also, if you take a look at the race and ethnicity, you probably would say, yeah, it's definitely not an Elon population. And the majority of them have very limited experience with Copilot. And even for those who actually claim they had experience with Copilot, it's really just, oh, I used it once, I heard about it, somebody actually showed it to me, rather than really serious users of Copilot. And close to 60% of them actually did have prior experience with generative AI overall. So I'm not going to go through the jargons, but for those who are really interested in, I would say, how we conducted analysis, this one will give you some information. So we used the ANOVA to compare, to actually examine the impact of conversation style on the AI outputs. And then we used the ANCOVA, factorial ANCOVA, to actually look at the interaction effects on user inputs and perceptions. Then in order to study the style matching, we actually used some dyadic correlation analysis. Finally, the exciting results. First, in terms of the readability, this may not necessarily be that surprising. The precise conversation style, AI outputs actually scored higher in terms of the readability compared to the other two. So the bars with the same color, the creative and balanced style, we didn't actually notice any difference, even though both of them actually was rated as lower in terms of readability compared to precise style. And then in terms of the linguistic characteristics, I only included the outputs, outcomes related to analytical thinking and authenticity, is because we didn't find any significant difference across conversation styles in terms of the emotional tone or actually cloud, but only analytical thinking and authenticity. So some of you may say, I didn't expect really the creative style would actually score higher in terms of the analytical thinking. This seems to be very counterintuitive, whereas the precise style actually was rated really low or scored really low in terms of the use of analytical thinking related words. So here is our interpretation. It's likely, because of the nature of the task we provided to our participants, that generative AI, Copilot in particular, will have to actually go through some of the reasoning to develop a coherent argument that is logical. And also, it may need to explain some concepts by breaking into smaller chunks and smaller pieces. And also the idea that it needs to actually come up with a strategic plan collaborating with the participants. So it's likely that words related to analytical thinking would be unavoidable, even if the users have been actually assigned to the creative style. And remember here, we are only talking about the outputs, not the user inputs. So that is our explanation. Whereas if you think about the precise style, because it's direct, concise, and also very straightforward, then they may actually limit the amount of the reasoning and also justification, which may actually lead to lower percentage of the usage of analytical thinking related words. And then the next one about authenticity. So you may be surprised that actually the balanced style actually stood out as the conversation style that led to the greater percentage of the use of words related to authenticity, whereas precise style and creative style didn't really actually make such a difference. What we have been assuming that might be the explanation for that may have something to do with the filters that have been actually adopted by the Copilot. So for the creative style, because it tries to be more imaginative and creative, so it may actually minimize the use of the things like present tense and also, I would say, first person pronouns. Whereas for the precise, in the precise style condition, because it tries to actually be more straightforward. So they may actually try to also avoid using those things so that the outputs could actually be more direct. So that's the reason. And then next, on users' input prompts. We didn't find anything significantly different in terms of the impact of conversation styles on the user inputs in terms of the linguistic characteristics. The only thing that we found as difference in terms of the impact of a conversation style is unreadability. So users actually provided harder to read inputs while they have been assigned to the creative style condition. Why might that be the case? Chris and I talked about it, and we thought that there may be several reasons, several explanations. One is that when users actually interacted with Copilot, they wonder and they could be confused by what this creative style is about. And also, if I'm actually working on a task, a problem-solving task, then how creative style would actually lead to some, is it about the creative ways of presenting the information, or is it about the solutions that they would actually be able to allow me to actually come up with would be creative? So given that is the situation, they may actually get lost a little bit about what they wanted to say and interact with the Copilot. This is one possibility, and the other possibility is it's not about how they understand the creative style or not, but they could actually get confused and also be thinking about more than they need to while actually reading the information provided by the Copilot while they have been assigned to the conversation style, the creative conversation style. And that potentially could lead to the way how they interact, and also if they do actually try to accommodate, then it will actually make it harder for them to actually express what they want and also what they wanted to actually get out of the Copilot. In terms of the style matching, this is something that we thought as the most interesting. Regardless of the assigned conversation style, we see significant correlations between Copilot and also the users in terms of the readability of whatever text that they generated, and also in terms of the cloud and also emotional tone. Yes?
Can you help me understand, so how many are in each condition for this, and like what kind of effect sizes are you able to get with those numbers?
That's a great question. So we have early on, I think I want to go back a little bit. We have a total 137 students. They have been randomly assigned to each of those three conditions.
So it's 3 conditions divided by 137.
Yes.
So it's still pretty small.
Yeah, it is. So given that is the situation, like I have highlighted, only those 3 things, we observe significant correlation regardless of whichever conversational style they have been assigned to. So what does that mean? If we take a look at those 3 things, those are probably the 3 things that are a little bit relatively easier for AI, generative AI chatbots to actually integrate some of the features to nurture the sense of natural conversation. So this may be the strategy that Copilot initially have integrated into the algorithm of the ones that they have used and as part of their language model. This is one thing. However, what we notice is also for authenticity, we only notice a significant correlation between user input and AI output in the balanced condition. This actually ties back to our earlier findings in terms of to what extent that AI-generated output actually were in the balanced condition actually demonstrated significantly more authenticity-related words compared to the others. And also more interestingly, did I miss one more thing? One more thing is for analytical thinking, we didn't notice any significant correlation between user inputs and also the AI outputs across all three conditions of conversational style. So what do those findings actually imply? Here is one thing that probably will help us understand what is really going on if we look at the perceptions, or in other words, users' evaluation of the outputs. So we see some very similar patterns if you take a look at the line charts on the left and on the right in terms of the perceived credibility and also perceived relevance. We didn't find any significant main or interaction effect of conversation style and I would say anticipated AI roles on the other two perceptions. Perceptions of the completeness and also perception of the quality, but only on credibility and also the relevance. Really what is where the significance comes from is from the matching of the anticipated roles about co-author and also the anticipated role as the converser. So if you take a look at the dotted line here, the red dotted line here, when participants considered the co-pilot would actually serve the function of a co-author, and if they have been actually assigned to the creative condition in both graphs, they actually perceived significantly less credibility and also less relevant of co-pilot's output compared to when they are compared to those are assigned to the balance or actually precise conditions. So what is actually going on here? We made the assumption and we actually draw the implication from this finding indicating that users actually did use the so-called role-based schema while actually thinking about what they would do. So if they think about the AI would serve as the co-author, they may actually expect more responsible responses and also more formal and logical reasoning that actually would actually be provided during the process of tackling this task. And similarly, when we look at the outcome of the relevance, this kind of style matching actually probably was actually making a difference here in terms of the outcome. However, the creative style may not necessarily follow the exact situation that actually meeting their expectation when they deem a co-pilot serving as a co-author. And this trend is consistent between, I would say, across both the perceptions related to credibility and the perceptions related to relevance. The other, I would say, significant difference that actually lead to these outcomes is when the users are considering co-pilot as the converser, but when they have been assigned to the balanced situation, it's likely that when they were assigned to the creative condition, AI as a converser could actually meet some of the social aspect of the expectation, leading to more engaged experience. So they feel good about it in terms of the credibility and also the relevance. However, when they assigned to the precise situation, they would consider AI as a converser is very effective, very direct, very straightforward. So when they have been assigned to creative and also precise style conditions, they feel that different kinds of needs and expectations of a conversation partner have already been met. However, when they were assigned to the balanced condition, because it tries to actually strike a balance between formal and informal conversation, then users may feel that AI which is actually expected as a converser as boring and less engaging because it always tries to actually strike a balance of being formal, being informal. So is it really formal or informal? It's something that we would not necessarily expect as the inconsistency while we are actually having conversation with a partner in real life. So that explains where really the significant interaction effect actually comes from between those two independent variables. So what are really the key takeaways? The first one, the output generated by different conversation styles offered by Copilot, they did differ. They did vary to some extent. However, they are not necessarily differ or varied necessarily in the direction how creative, balanced, and also the precise has been defined as the term actually implies, and also by Copilot. So what we actually draw as a conclusion is, yes, Copilot has tried. However, their language model probably needs further refinement. This is the first thing. Second, we did actually discover users actually applied role-based schema to their interaction with AI. And this aligns with some of the early theories when scholars in communications, in I would say user experience studies, computer interactions, they proposed a paradigm that computers are social actors, or human beings do consider and perceive computers and potentially interfaces as the social actors, and probably would apply some of the rules in human-to-human social interaction to the machines, to the computers, to the system as well. Second, another insight drawing from the findings of this study is that the one-size-fits-all model of providing the same AI platform for everybody probably may not actually work or could be challenged. So what are some of the design implications associated with that? First, we wanted to actually consider the possibilities of providing role selection features and also some of the style options that would allow users to further fine-tune the way how the AI will actually be interacting with them. Second, if they are not offering some of the interface features, interface options, if there are some ways for us to actually further enhance the algorithms and the language models for AIs to better actually detect the role expectations or anticipations from the user's inputs, especially from the prompts that they receive, and potentially that would actually also help them to provide more tailored experience for the users while interacting with them. Okay, question, anything? Yes.